So here we're going to take a look at another plant. We're going to take a look at what it needs and what it can provide. So this one, a lot of people around here have. It is, let's see if I can pull a leaf off of here, rhubarb. So this rhubarb was actually a seedling last year, and it's producing fairly well this year. I wasn't really going to harvest any, but I'm harvesting some for this video just so I can use it for illustrations. So what does this need? First off, I'm going to say what form I use it for in my food forest. Oh, I'll have to look back at the video and see how loud that train is for you. Sounds like it's a via rail, so I think it'll be by really quickly. Yeah. Okay. So we get the via rails, and then we get the big cargo trains that go on forever. So this I use in two forms in my food forest. I use it as a shrub. It's not really a shrub, but when you look at it, I mean, they can get pretty big. These are just seedlings, and when you look at this thing, it's basically a small bush. So I use it as a shrub in my food forest, and I also use it as a ground cover. So we'll look at why. First, what does it need? Well, there's moisture in this. So obviously, there's a lot of moisture in this, so obviously it needs water. So that way it can make this delicious sour stuff that we load with sugar and bake into stuff. So it needs water, it needs nutrients in order to grow these leaves. What are these leaves? These leaves are basically big solar panels. You can see it already starting to curl up in the heat since I picked it. So that's a sign of it losing water. It's curling up, it's looking for water. So these are big solar panels, and that's because it needs sun. It doesn't need sun year-round, but it does need sun, especially in the spring, before everything else comes up. So that way it can produce these leaves. It can build the roots. It can flower. It can do its whole life cycle. So those are things that it needs. It needs protection from having too much water. It's not really going to have issues with wind unless it's outrageous wind. I've never really noticed any pest pressure on them, so I don't think it needs protection from pests, at least in this area. I mean, sometimes you'll get little holes chewed in the leaves, but there you go, you can see one right in the middle of your screen now. But it's never enough damage that it's actually an issue, so maybe they are already being protected by things, maybe they protect themselves. I also haven't seen any disease with them, so I don't know if something else is already protecting them or whatnot, but if there are diseases, it would need protection from that. Now let's look at what it yields. So first off, we've got the sour stem here that we use in baking and cooking. I've seen it used in ciders, in pies, in all sorts of stuff. As kids, we always just ate it. It's a little bit sour, but for me it's a memory flavor. So I guess it yields fond memories for me. So it has a food yield. It has shade. So this provides a lot of shade on the soil, which is why I use it as a living mulch. So this one, I've just pulled a big branch off of it, but it provides a lot of shade, and under here there aren't many weeds. There's a little bit of clover here. There's a blackberry trying to come up, and at the edge there's a little bit of plantain, but even that plantain, if we look at that, here it is, it stops right here. This big leaf was over here, shading out the other half of that. So that shows that this doesn't really want to grow in that shade. And that's why I'm using it as a ground cover, because as this grows, it shades out the ground. It makes it really hard for weeds to get established. So I've got a layer of it all the way around. So it provides a weed barrier. That's another yield that we can obtain from it, another thing that it provides. Okay, so then what else? Well, so this leaf it's a living mulch, but also once it's dead, I can just set it down somewhere, and it's a mulch that will continue to shade out that spot. And so that's, neighbors are waving. Joys of living in town and standing here sitting in my garden on a little stool talking to my camera. This is compostable material. I'm curious if this has any other nutrients or benefits that I could incorporate elsewhere into the garden, but I will, for now, I'll just compost it. And then that can go back in and feed the garden. A lot of it, I just drop it right where it is and I let it compost in place because it breaks down pretty quickly. What else does it provide? It actually does have another need. It's not one that we normally think of for rhubarb, but when it puts on these flowers, it does need pollination. So that's in order for it to drop seed and to continue to spread and reproduce. Most people stop it from flowering. I enjoy the look of the flowers. I'm also collecting the seeds from them. That's another thing that it provides. So this one doesn't really have any seed on it yet, but if I go over around the pear tree here to this one, let's see, I'm just going to flip the camera around here. And there we go. So those are all little seeds that are forming. And if you think about it, this whole bush with all these seeds, this came from one seed last year. So one of these little things is now producing all of these. So that's another yield, it's seed. Well, what's the seed good for? It might have nutritional value. Most seed has protein and such, but it's a very small seed. It's got this papery coating. I can't imagine that anyone eats it unless it's out of desperation. So what does the seed provide? Well, a handful of seeds last year gave me almost 100 new plants. 100 new plants means I get to multiply all those yields. And 100 seeds that's nothing. I'm going to have thousands of seeds that I'm collecting this year. Okay, so what else does it provide? Provides shade, provides a weed barrier, provides food. It has a taproot, so its root, actually, if I can find a dandelion, I don't usually pull up the dandelions in my garden. I don't have a whole lot of them right now. But, let's see. There's one. I'm just going to try and pull one up here. There we go. The reason I'm pulling the dandelion up, this is a very young dandelion. And actually the sun is helpful there. You can see that pointy root. So that's called a taproot. That root is going to drive deep into the ground. It also has a bunch of little, I'm trying to zoom in with my hand on the lens there. There we go. So it has all these little hairs on it as well, and as the root continues to extend down, those hairs will continue to spread out. That's going to dive deep into the ground. It's going to pull nutrients from well below where the rest of these plants can get it from. For example, I've got a bunch of radishes here that self-seeded. These have a little bit of a taproot, but for the most part, they tend to get a lot of their nutrients near the top. It's a really bad example to pull up. I just reached in and grabbed something. But I've got the strawberries here. I've got a lot of other flowers and such, that their roots don't go very deep. So the rhubarb mines nutrients from deep down, brings it up, puts it into those big leaves, and into all of these flowers that it's dropping. There's nutrients in those. And it drops those on the surface where they'll decompose and become accessible to other plants. So it's mining and finding nutrients from deep down and bringing them up for us. The shade is providing water conservation. It keeps the soil covered from the sun, which means that it's not going to be dried out by the sun right away. It's like a living mulch. So over here, I've got straw. But if I could figure out how to grow my tomatoes and my rhubarb together, which I'd probably just involve planting the tomatoes when they're older, I could plant them around these, and I'd have no weed pressure. And the tomatoes, I'd just prune them until I wouldn't use the bottom little bit of it, and then above there, I'd be able to grow my tomatoes. And they'd be using those nutrients that the rhubarb has mined up, and the roots would be able to have moisture because they're not going to get dried out right away because of the shelter from the rhubarb leaves. What else is it doing? It's accumulating moisture as well. So as we look at, I'm going to come over to this one. It's a nice example here. As we look at this, if you were a raindrop falling down, most of the places you hit here, it's all going to come down into that one area. So if this is planted out over the walkway, it's going to catch some of the moisture that hits, and that's just going to roll back down into the garden. Did you think that rhubarb could do so many things? What else can it do? It's, I'm not sure. If you have ideas, let me know. But otherwise, try growing something, try cooking something, try making something, try learning something, and be willing to make mistakes. I planted 83 rhubarb plants out last year. I was not sure if that was a mistake, and now I'm glad I did, because that is providing a great weed barrier. It's acting exactly as I hoped it would. And it's attracting pollinators, because all of these flowers, there's so many of them. This is after they've all disappeared already, or a lot of them have. Those flowers are attracting pollinators, are providing a food source that was really early this year. Try and make mistakes. So if that was a mistake, what would I do? Well, I'd dig them out and I'd compost them. So what? I got a handful of seeds that I had bought the seeds, but if I had thought ahead, I could have gotten them for free from another rhubarb plant. And make mistakes. If you make a mistake, learn from it. If you succeed at something, learn from it. If you're not sure whether it was a mistake or not, learn from it. Because there's probably good and bad lessons from each, from everything that we do. And then try and do something regenerative. Not just sustainable, but regenerative. So instead of using pesticide or herbicides to kill all your weeds that are coming in from your neighbor's property, so again, that's an abandoned part of my neighbor's property, plant something like rhubarb that is not just, instead of harming the environment or being neutral for the environment, it's actually going to continue to build your soil and make it better. Do something regenerative. Until next time.